This is Cindy Clark from PAC B TV, and we're here this morning on a Zoom meeting with Jim Hogan, the former director of the Greater Baldwinsville Ambulance Corps. Good morning, Jim. How are you?
Good morning. Doing well. Thank you.
Good, good. And we've also got Mayor Clark, my brother, who has a memory like a trap door that he, as far as information between the two of them, I'm sure we can keep this conversation going probably for 2 or 3 days, but we'll try to limit it to, well, however we limit it. It's not going to be limited. We're just going to talk about the history and maybe, you know, just take a trip back down memory lane. Jim, you want to tell us a little bit how you got involved and, you know, how long you were with the ambulance corps, that type of thing?
Yeah. Yes. Great. Good morning. And was involved with the ambulance since 1990. That's when I moved to the Baldwinsville area from the Albany area, and I joined as a volunteer. Like even back then, that was how most of everything was in EMS, was all volunteer. And then I was a volunteer all the way up until 2013, and I retired from a position I had in the business world in the Syracuse area, and then I actually became the director. It was a career position for the ambulance corps from 2013 until this past June of 21. I actually retired. So it was a combination volunteer and as we transitioned to a career position, we're now called a combination agency. It's a career staff supplemented by volunteers. And so the last 9 years as the director. And it's a great organization. Had a lot of really wonderful experiences, being a volunteer paramedic and also being the director. And so it's like we're talking about now, I'm adjusting to the retirement world.
It's a good world. It is.
Yeah. But I guess the beginning of the history, GBAC was established in 1962. So 2022 will be our 60th anniversary.
Oh my heavens.
So 60 years serving the community. And then so it initially was all volunteer, and we're actually we're a not-for-profit organization. And then the history that I was told, because I was obviously here in 62, was a group of Greater Baldwinsville residents all got together. And I guess it was led by Ralph Gates.
Mm-hmm.
He was the funeral home director for obviously Gates Funeral Home. And he had a spare hearse.
Yeah.
So I guess he had the only vehicle where you could transport somebody horizontal. So he had a spare hearse, and then a bunch of citizens got together and they formed the ambulance corps. And the story I was told is they went around door to door asking for donations to get the ambulance corps off the ground. And then Dick can help me too. Then I guess initially they operated out of the funeral home, and then a couple of years later, I think it was in 63 or so, they then operated out of the old village hall. And then in 1965, they built a building on 11 Albert Palmer Lane, and where we're presently now. And then in 1997, we built a new building, on Albert Palmer Lane. And a little side story, I actually had a patient probably 10 years ago, and his name was Albert Palmer. And he told me that he was the mayor, a mayor of the village of Baldwinsville. And as I was taking care of him, taking him to the hospital, he kind of gave me some history. But it was just kind of a coincidence that my patient was Albert Palmer, who the street was named after, and he was the mayor. And so I just kind of thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. But that's kind of that's how it got kicked off. And things were a lot simpler time back then. There was a bunch of really thoughtful community members in the training. You just went to the American Red Cross and got a first aid certificate. Mm-hmm. And they did first aid. and basically, did a great job of taking care of the community. And then it has, as medicine advanced and time went on, throughout the 70s and 80s, the state health department got involved in, like a lot of things, that there was increased requirements. So people became emergency medical technicians, and then in their late 80s, early 90s, advanced to at the paramedic level. And my story with that, it's a good, bad thing. The good part about it is the training has advanced, so we're doing emergency medicine. It's like an emergency room on this with wheels, but it has really made it difficult for volunteers because it's just lots of training. Just to give you an example, an EMT, emergency medical technician, depends on how the course is set up, but that's 2-3 nights a week for about 6-7 months.
Wow.
And then to be a paramedic, depending on the program, it's another 2 years. So it's like going to nursing school at the paramedic level. So it's very difficult for somebody to do that and then be a volunteer. My little analogy is when's the last time you knew somebody that was going to nursing school with the intentions of being a volunteer nurse? Mm-hmm. So the positive thing about it is the training is wonderful, but it's greatly changed all the organizations like ours across the country, because people just don't have that time to be a volunteer.
We lost audio?
We lost your audio, Jim.
He's frozen. What happened?
Well, he lives up in the woods.
How negative. It's lots of positive, improvements and training, throughout the years.
We lost you for a minute there. You froze up and we didn't have any audio.
Okay.
How's your internet up there?
I got 2 squirrels running around. My internet's fine. You can hear me okay now?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
You're back.
Yeah. So again, the training is advanced greatly, but it's still a very healthy organization. But it's now basically transitioned, to an organization that's career oriented, supplemented by volunteers, and that's a good thing. But it's quite drastically changed from what it was in the 60s and 70s and 80s. And then what also affected is, as we all know, the greater Baldwin area has dramatically grown. So, our call volume now is up to about 4,500, 4,600 calls a year. So we average like 13 calls in a 24-hour period. So it's too much volume for people to do it as a volunteer. And you're probably familiar, our territory, again, it's called Greater Baldwin-Williamson. So we cover obviously the village of all, but we cover all of the town of Lysander and the town of Van Buren, and we cover about half of the town of Geddes.
I don't even know that.
Yeah, we go all the way down to to Lakeland. We actually go down State Fair Boulevard right down to the fairgrounds. We don't cover the fairgrounds, but right down to the bottom of the hill. So it's about 100 square miles, and I think it's around almost 50,000 people altogether.
Now, is this how it was back then? The same territory that you covered at its beginning?
I think the beginning, it was mainly the village, because the story I was told is, as the village grew, if somebody got sick or injured, there was no ambulance, and the ambulance may have come from the city of Syracuse.
Oh, okay.
And then that's what people got together and said, well, we really need an ambulance for for the village of Baldwinsville. And then as the ambulance became operational, the other towns, I think, requested, coverage too, and then it just expanded to the greater Baldwinsville area.
Now, were we one of the first in this area way back when to provide this service?
Yeah. So in cities, metropolitan areas, the ambulances historically are commercial ambulance, like for-profit ambulances.
Right.
And the suburbs and had ambulances that either were part of a fire department or they were separate.
Okay.
So what I've been told is GBAC is one of the oldest independent ambulances in New York State. So
Makes sense.
Yeah.
it's just has a long history of just having really good people, and then very nice support from the community, which is really, that's been very beneficial to the organization, especially during COVID. A lot of support with help, from the community with COVID. People helping us with masks and.
How about food?
Yeah, we do get food.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the mayor probably can. I'd be interested to hear from Dick some of the older part of it, because as you probably people aware of, your mom and dad were members.
Yes, mom and dad were life members. So Cindy and I and our younger sister Wendy we were involved in the ambulance corps, because when both your parents are, your schedule revolved around, I think mom might have done Monday nights, 4 to 12 or 6 to 12, whatever it was. And then dad did Thursday nights. Then mom got to where she did a day shift. But your dinner and everything else revolved around, we got ambulance duty tonight. They tried not to do it together so that one of them was home. I was still in high school. Cindy was 4 years behind me. And then Wendy was just 3 or 4 years old when they got involved with the ambulance. So, we did have family stuff. And you're right. It was Ralph Gates was involved early. I can remember at one time seeing a hearse parked in front of where the police station is. The big window, when you walk up the stairs on the left, there's a big window there. Well, there was a garage that went underneath it. At one time, that was where the fire trucks, before they built the fire station, years ago. And so there would be this red hearse sitting there. And I would say to people, why do they have a hearse parked? I said, well, that's the ambulance. I said, so if you're not sure if you're dying, but you call for the ambulance and they pull up with a hearse, you're pretty sure you are dying. You look out the window and
there's a hearse.
There's a hearse, and what do they know that we don't know at that point? But mom and dad were life members. They got involved, I think, when the community came together, they joined in, and it became a lot of their social life. The ambulance corps threw good parties, Christmas parties. There was a gal, Una Abold, had a camp up on
in Mexico,
Lake Ontario, just above Mexico. So they would have a big picnic every year up there, and it was a driver and a first aider.
Yeah. And what about a helper? Didn't they have a helper? Or
sometimes they had a helper, but it was hard getting a helper.
Right.
Easier at night. During the day was tough because people were pretty much work daytimes. It was just generally that way. So they were lucky with our family. First of all, dad grew up out in Van Buren, but he knew every road. He knew most of the people who lived out, if they had to go outside the village. Excuse me. He knew, I know where that house is, because that's where we used to hunt for pheasants in their backyard type thing. And mom was a registered nurse. So not only she had the first aid training, but she had worked professionally as a nurse. And, I can remember them coming home at midnight, whichever one it was, coming home at midnight and saying, we didn't have any calls tonight. I can't imagine today that you have very many nights where people could say, well, we didn't have any calls. I mean,
Yeah.
First of all, I think people had a different approach as far as they're sick, but I'll wait till morning and call the doctor. And now people are pretty quick. And in some cases, it's probably very smart to call the ambulance right away, and because a lot of times you can keep things from getting too big by getting to it quickly. The fundraising is interesting. You talk about it. I'm sure the name Joe Lafredo will trigger a lot of thoughts from people in the community, because Joe has been just the ultimate volunteer kind of guy, not only with the ambulance, but with PAC B. And he was, I did never have him as a teacher, but I heard he was a terrific teacher. Kids just loved him. So he and my dad would team up for fundraising. And every year they would have like a coffee can drive. So you would go to the door. I work for the Balls Ambulance Corps. Anything you could contribute to the cause, we would appreciate it. Somebody threw a $10 bill on the coffee can, and they'd go to the next house. Well, as Joe tells the story, they rarely got past 4 or 5 houses because there'd be somebody they knew who would say, well, first of all, you got to come in and have a beer.
Yeah.
Well, then you get a couple of beers, and all of a sudden it's like, well, geez, Barney, I don't know if we ought to go to any more houses with the beer we've had. So we'll do this tomorrow night. So a lot of nights got interrupted. Some nights I think they got a little further than others. But Dad and Joe were quite the team. And I think they were able to convince people to contribute mightily. They had that way about them. And I remember one time Mom was ill, and Dad had I don't think Dad actually called for the ambulance because he usually was in a state of panic. But one of the sisters probably called for the ambulance. And as the crew was coming in the door, my mother said, "Is Joe Lafredo with them?" And Joe went, "Yes, Lucille, I'm right here." Okay, I feel better now.
Yeah.
So Joe was the driver or whatever. And it was that comfort feeling that people came to the door were people you knew. I'm sure that's different now, but it's nice to know, as you say, it's an emergency room on wheels. So when they come in, they got all the equipment. They can tell you right away, you're not having a heart attack, or you are having a heart attack, or we need to get you to the hospital, or let's check you out for a few minutes and see how you're doing here. Maybe it's just anxiety, whatever it might be. But Joe Alfredo will always, I've known him as an adult differently. He's such a great guy, but to think back to those ambulance corps days and how they would laugh. They get talking with Joe and my dad and my mother would say, I can't trust these guys to go out anywhere. They're representing, and they'd have their ambulance corps blue jackets on, the windbreakers. And that's the way it was done. And Mom had a regular shift during the day that she ended up with Murray Peacock, who was an older guy, lived up on Artillery Lane. And just a wonderful fella. He was reminded me a little bit of Jimmy Carter as Jimmy Carter got older, the look. And so he would be the driver and Mom would be the first aider. And occasionally they would get a helper. And I think the police showed up a lot on the calls. And if they needed help carrying the stretcher and getting in and back in the ambulance, they had an extra set of hands. But the social, some of my parents' best friends are Jim and Mary Kane through the ambulance corps, Dick and Sally Lee, ambulance corps, Dick and Cornelia Giles. Dick was in the ambulance corps. The Sochas, Art and Colleen Socha, Norb and Dorothy Rausch. They were all, so many of them were parents of kids that I went to school with. So they would say, oh, this one was there. Dad drove, and his first aider quite often was Judy Brzee, or sometimes Jenny Hagerman.
Yeah, I remember that.
Those were all names of kids we went to school with. Right. So it was really kind of cool. You didn't really know the kid maybe, but it gave you a little bit of a connection because your parents were in the ambulance corps, and it really was a community operation. And Mom would say, some of the calls were older people just actually needing somebody to comfort them. It was almost like you were a social worker more than a ambulance. You'd go and I don't know if I took my medicine. I feel weak. And they'd say, well, where's your medicine? Mom would get it. Does it look like you had this at all today? No, I don't think I took it. So, well, we'll wait, take it, and we'll wait a while and see how half hour later, I'm feeling better. Okay, well, call us if you have a problem. It's so different today. They would hook machines up, checking blood pressure and pulse and all that type of stuff. It was a different time, but I really think we were ahead of most of the communities in the area, because our ambulance, where it was located on Palmer Lane, could be anywhere in the village in less than 5 minutes.
Right.
And I would say to my mother or my father, boy, it must be fun to ride, going 90 miles an hour on the highway. We don't go that fast. And my father would say, you do feel like you'd like to go faster, but you realize that if you get in an accident, you can't help the person in the back. I mean, they need to get to the hospital. So you go a little easier and maybe go a little slower, but you make sure you get there. And, they had the winter days where, I imagine like the blizzard of 66. We got 50, 60 inches of snow in a day and a half, and the streets were shut down. We lived right next door to Gates Funeral Home. And, that was a very busy street when we were kids. That's where all the tractor trailers came through. The only thing that went by for 4 days was snowmobiles. That's the first time I ever saw a snowmobile.
Wow.
Me too. Yeah.
So you wondered, but they did kind of I think there was almost like a public announcement. If you have an emergency, please call, because we may have to walk half a block to get to your house, or somebody will try to get to you. And, and I think they had maybe somebody with a plow that they could call that would get them on a side street that hadn't been plowed yet. So it was a terrific time for my parents. They really enjoyed the ambulance corps. There were different parties, again, like socially, they made a lot of great friends, and I was very, very proud of them. And I'm sure Cindy felt the same way. It was interesting. Cindy worked at the bakery at the Four Corners, where I think it's Greens and Grains is now.
Greens and Grains. Yeah, next to the candy store.
Okay. Yeah.
It was at one time Clyde Cakery, and then became the Corner Cakery. And a hunting buddy of my dad's and a drinking buddy, Noah Warren, owned the place. And I don't remember exactly how it worked, but at some point they had at 4:45, they would box up the end of they closed at maybe 5. So they would box up the donuts they had left. Mm-hmm. And one of us would run down and get the box and bring it home. And whoever was on the ambulance that night would take it down, and then they'd have donuts and Kiglies and all that stuff to share with the rest of the people. Because a lot of people would stop in and visit, just that were involved. It was not like a club, but, go down and visit and sit at the table and talk about a call I had yesterday. And we'll talk. If they had a meeting, they had donuts they could put on the table. And so we managed to get one out of the box before it left the house.
Of course.
But again, it was that community thing. And my mother would say, it'd be 10 of 5. And say, oh, you better get down to the corner pharmacy. Or the
donut, the Corner Cakery. Yeah.
Your dad's got ambulance tonight, and want to make sure you don't get locked out and miss them. So one of us hop on a bike or something, race down and grab the donuts. And it was just one more case of people in the community thinking of the ambulance corps as pretty important.
In retrospect, not to interrupt, but in retrospect, I'm thinking, because I wasn't familiar or don't have a lot of memories of the initial startup. But as the years went by, like Dick was talking about, getting the donuts and parents down there and, the meetings and the social events, I think that was, in my opinion, that was kind of the starting of the real serious community involvement. Everybody coming together as a community, because we're there now. I mean, what they've done, Jim, for the involvement in the ambulance corps since you've been in, but there's other events and causes, you know, the volunteer center and the food pantry, all of that. I think a lot of that started back with the ambulance corps when people really, you know, going door to door, asking for the donations, bringing the community together. We've got an ambulance here. If people get sick, we've got a way potentially to save lives. And like Dick said, you knew a lot of the people that came to your house. And I think I don't know, maybe it's just, I don't have a proper memory, but I'm thinking that is when the real community involvement for everything kind of started back then, because it grew not only with the ambulance corps, but like I said, other volunteer organizations, they all participated. And it's gotten to be a wonderful thing here in our community where everybody, you put it on Facebook now and they're looking for, you know, some food for the VFW or the food pantry or whatever. People are right there. Of course, social media has helped tremendously.
Right.
But it still was great when we were back then, before all the social media, people found these things out. It was a smaller community, but people, just word of mouth, phone, you know, there were no cell phones, and we managed to get the word out, or they managed to get the word out of what was going on and the needs. But I think the ambulance corps really was, I don't know, what do you think about that, Dickie? You think that might be, am I way off base here? Or?
No, I think, you know, maybe unknowingly, people involved, that just that community come together with the ambulance and, you know, and with the fire department being also, you know, a strong community thing. I think that those kinds of things made people think good stuff about our community. And I think, like you say, during the COVID, when they would say, somebody, a family needs this family, and people would be jumping on Facebook and, you know, where do you need it? I'll deliver it in 10 minutes, you know. And I do think it's, I mean, first of all, Baldwinsville is a different kind of community because while we're a suburb of Syracuse, unlike Liverpool, Camillus, or Syracuse, we're not linked to Syracuse. We don't have a common border.
Right.
We've always been this isolated little community, separate 690, the thruway, you know, everything kind of keeps us on this side. And I think we've looked at ourselves as a special community, and all that stuff kind of has grown out of that. And I think the ambulance corps was a great leader into that type of thing. You know, it was pretty cool when you would tell somebody, well, you know, I don't know if you know my mom and dad, but they're both in the ambulance corps. Oh, they're in the ambulance corps. Wow. You know, that's terrific. You know, that's really wonderful. I mean, that's something I always thought about. When your parents are doing it, that's great. And you would feel pretty good because it was special. And it's obviously, I mean, it is nowhere would you recognize the old ambulance corps with the new ambulance corps. I mean, we're talking about highly technical, highly trained, but there was somebody that could be at your door in 5 minutes and you know,
what a source of comfort.
You know, check your pulse and say, well, you are a little fast. We probably should get you. We should get you checked out. Maybe we take you to the hospital. They're a little more reluctant, I think, to go to the hospital at that point. But they didn't get the volume of calls that they get now. You didn't have Radisson. I'm guessing Harbor Heights was just getting built.
Yeah.
Village Green was just being built. So that if they had to go outside the village, and I don't remember that they did much, because I think, as Jim said, a lot of the fire departments, probably like Warner's and places like that, had an ambulance or a rescue vehicle. So they would show up and they had oxygen at least and could race you to the hospital. But it was a great service, and because of it, it was, you know, really got a good foundation. And now look what we have. I would put our ambulance corps, from what I can see, up against any ambulance group.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So,
well, how long were mom and dad involved in that? I know didn't they also hold offices too?
Well, Dad was he was not the director, he was the president.
President, right.
Big difference, because the president ran the meetings and that type of stuff, and the director ran the operation.
Right, the director of operations, I remember that. Okay.
So Dad was the president couple different times, I think. And, you know, mom probably was an officer at different times. But again, she was valued because she was a registered nurse. So whenever she was on, they felt they had a little extra something going for that crew.
Yeah.
And
That
Dad,
was a biggie
well,
back then to have somebody with a little bit of medical knowledge.
yeah.
Yeah.
I can remember Dad going down and doing an overnight occasionally. You know, he didn't do it too often because he had to get up and go to work at Allied Chemical, Solvay Process at the time. But he would say, I can come down for the night, but I can only stay till 6. I got to get up and be ready to go to work. And so they'd say, well, we can get whoever's coming in at 7 can come in an hour early to cover that hour. And so he'd go down and sleep. You know, they just had a couple of cot type things in the back, I think. And eventually, I think maybe upstairs when they added on. And,
Yeah.
you know, the beginning was like nothing much more than
A room.
a shed.
Yeah.
A room for the, you know, they had one ambulance and then a room where you could sit, they had a couch and a TV and a kitchen.
And eat donuts.
And a place to put the donuts.
Yes.
And so it's very, I mean, they would be amazed. They'd be thrilled to think that they had something to do with getting the ball rolling and to see what we have now. I'm sorry, you know, Dad was gone in 1990 and Mom died a year later. So they didn't really get to see the big growth. But
We have several plaques on the walls for like the life members. And I think I might have showed you at one time. So your mom and dad's name is on the plaque.
Yep.
As life members. And I remember when all those names that you rattled off, I remember looking at the plaques and I didn't know them, but all those names are all on those plaques.
Yep.
History.
Good people. There was a picture somebody posted on Facebook not too long ago, groundbreaking. When Art Stumer was still the mayor. So, I mean, we're talking
Many years.
late 60s, maybe, when they were going to do an addition on Palmer Lane. And all the people that lined up, there was only one person I couldn't identify. You know, I mean, you're talking from 50 years ago, basically. But you just knew them so well. I mean, some of them you only knew by name. And all of a sudden you'd say, I'd be quite often in the nice weather, I'd get on the bike and go down when one of my parents was on duty and just stop in for an hour, visit. And so you'd get to meet people, which was nice because then you'd be in a grocery store and somebody would go up, hello there, Mr. Clark. And you look up, oh, Judy Brzee or the Hagermans were fun people. They were the kind of people that after a party, mom and dad might go to the diner with them. I probably shouldn't tell the story, but I do think it was an ambulance corps event that led them to the diner, and they got singing, and they were singing "God Bless America." You can imagine they weren't singing because they'd had a lot of orange juice.
No.
They got
hardly.
The Kenny Rogers song, "You Picked the Fine Time to Leave Me, Lucille."
Yeah, that was my mom's name. Yeah.
Well, the waitress came over and she said, you folks are going to have to tone it down because other people aren't finding you amusing, I guess.
No, their singing was probably horrible.
And eventually they came over and asked them to leave because they kept singing. So, you know, my mother was a little embarrassed to say she got thrown out of the diner because my mother averaged about 4 drinks a year. I mean, she might go to a party and have a highball. And I mean, she wasn't a beer drinker and that type of stuff. And so I said, you know, all the times that I've gone in there after being out partying with my friends all night and we were rowdy, we never got thrown out of the diner.
No, not once. Not once. She
had to go my mother because my mother was pretty prim and proper and
very conservative.
And she earned that title because she was she believed in being polite. She believed in treating people nice. And, you know, so here she got bounced out of the diner.
Wow.
And she tried to, you know, well, that's because of the ambulance corps, those crazy people.
Yeah, right.
But that's what made it such a wonderful community event or community organization is, you know, the friendships and the people you got to meet and know. And we still have that. It's just, it's now a workplace too.
Yeah.
And you do lose a little bit of that because, we're an employer, and it's really important for us. We want to create an environment where people want to be there, not because it's just their job. And so we've been pretty successful with doing that. But when it was all volunteer, you do have it's a different feel to the place. It still is a good feel, but it is different.
Yeah.
When it, back then. And our structure is still similar. Like we have a president, Mark Procopio is our president. And, we have, a vice president, secretary, treasurer. And then we have we all report to a board of directors, and it's a community board of directors. We really wanted to get the community involved, and also get expertise into the board to help guide us. So we have 2 CPAs that are on our board, that they're community members. Michael Bryant is on our board. He's a lawyer, the judge in the town of Lysander.
Mhm.
And then so there's 2 accountants. There's a lady who's has human resource background from a bank downtown, and then Dr. Matt Sarsfield, who lives in the village. He's our medical director, and he's on our board also. And he part of the requirements with New York State, if you're function at the paramedic level like we do, you have to be overseen by a doctor. So Matt is he's a certified, board certified emergency medicine physician. So he works at Upstate, the trauma center. And then he also teaches emergency medicine at the medical college. So he lives in the village, and he's very involved with, giving us guidance and just, overseeing what we do. So there's that community board that it's a great group of people to work with, and they give you another view and a business background, and because what we really are a little business.
Mhm.
It's a not-for-profit business. But the structure is still similar to what it was, just that it's not all volunteer.
It is interesting. One of the things I have enjoyed since I've been mayor is going to the Ambulance Corps annual banquet, and where people get recognized and stuff. And it's always interesting to hear the number of hours that some of the volunteers put in.
Yeah.
And to realize, they're not getting paid. They're showing up because they think it's the right thing to do to help. And, but just the recognition of all the people who are involved. And well, I'll tell you what, to see the names and the number of people who are involved, it's very impressive. And it makes you feel very good about your community. And not all of them are from Baldwinsville, obviously, but they're spending their time here, and they're helping the people of our community. And it's just little things like that. I get goosebumps sitting in the thing and listening to say, well, this person not only did their shift, but they did 27,000 extra shifts. And it's like, that's somebody who cares. I mean, they're obviously trying to make a living, but you got to have a heart for the people you're dealing with to put that kind of time. And I mean, because there's people that come in a factory, come in at 8:00 and punch the time card, and at 4:30 they punch it and leave, and they have nothing to do with nothing the rest of the time. And it doesn't seem that way with the ambulance corps.
Right. Yeah, that's what we're fortunate. Unfortunately, we haven't had a banquet now in 2 years because of COVID. We'll have to see what they're going to be doing for 2022, because our fiscal year starts May 1st. So that's our new year's beginning of May. And historically, we had our banquet the first weekend of May. And I haven't heard yet. I know they're trying to play it by ear, but in 2020 and 2021, unfortunately, we didn't have a banquet, because of COVID. So, but one of our real important members, volunteers, who's been with us a long time is Pat Moses. Her mom and dad had the Moses IGA.
Yep.
Yeah. So Pat, in fact, I just talked with Pat last night. and she's kind of similar to like your mom. Pat's an RN. She works as an RN in Krause's emergency department, and then she's a volunteer paramedic. And she is just a wonderful lady that she's been with the organization longer than I was, and she's still going strong. And she brings that nurse background, paramedic background, and she's just done a tremendous amount. Pat Moses has for the organization, and she's still going. She's still.
Oh, that's great.
That's
People
great.
are very, very dedicated. There's no question about it. You talk like Dick was saying, some of the older members, those people, there's so many names that, you can't even say them all, but they were there always if you needed them. It was a real true commitment right from their heart to get involved in this, to start it up, to stay involved, and to do whatever it took to make it successful. And it really, it's very heartwarming. It truly, truly is what this community does, what we've done, how we've expanded, how everybody comes together, how it's all evolved. I'm very proud of this community. Very proud.
That I am too. And like I said, it became my wife Ann and our adult home. We raised 2 kids in Baldwinsville, and they went to the Baldwinsville schools, and so I'm very happy to have lived in Baldwinsville and the greater area. It's
Well, I'll tell you, the experience that I had with you, Jim, in dealing with you was always first class. I knew if I had a question, I'll call Jim Hogan. He'll help me with the answer. And I would ask people, when you get that little thing in the mail, we didn't talk about this, so this is just me, that's asking for a contribution. Realize that they have 3 ambulances, I believe, right, Jim?
actually we have 5 now.
Or 5 now. And so we a lot of equipment that needs to be taken care of. Obviously, some money comes in from people who use the ambulance, but not from everybody, obviously. Right. So if whatever donations you make, this is the tin can drive in a fancier way. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And just if you can stick a check in and support the ambulance corps, just to make their job that much easier, to know that they don't have to worry about finances. Because I'll tell you, it's something that you will never realize how much you miss it until it's gone. And let's don't ever get to that position. And I'm sure they're not in that position, but right. They need the community support more than just a pat on the back. And so I would encourage people to do what they can to support the ambulance corps. And hopefully it will be here as long as I'm here, mm-hmm. and longer.
Much longer, right.
We appreciate that. That was a pleasure working with you, Dick, as the mayor, especially during the COVID, because you're so well known in the area and gave me a lot of names and connections of people to call, and because there was a period where it was tough getting supplies. Like, fortunately, we did have a stock of masks and cleaning supplies, but Dick was very helpful in connecting me with people who to call this person, and it really worked. And then we had a group of people like making masks, homemade masks. Yes. Yeah. And
I think a friend of my wife's got you some shields.
Yeah, shields. Yeah.
I don't know if it's Mike Mullins. I think is a company that makes those.
Yeah.
My wife and his wife are great friends from years ago. And in conversation and reading my wife's Facebook stuff about anybody who can donate, blah, 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 she said, "Oh, my husband read that, and he took some masks over the shields over the ambulance corps." Right. So those kind of things. Again, I get goosebumps when people do those kind of things. It's me too. And in the whole COVID in the beginning, when we were, what the times you're talking about, Jim, when we really didn't have any answers at all. Nobody knew what was going to happen. And it was a rush to get equipment, and people were saying, don't use up all the masks because emergency people need masks and people in the hospitals need masks, blah blah blah. And I remember talking with you a couple times and calling you up and saying, can we help you? Is there anything you need? And we did have a few contacts, and I'm glad it worked out. But that's what a community is supposed to, that's kind of what the word community means. You all work together, and the ambulance is the best example in our community of what partnership can be like, starting way back in the early 60s and with a funeral home donation of a hearse. Funny as that sounds, and it was funny, but probably got somebody to the
A
hospital.
little self-serving probably too.
That had to be interesting to see a hearse pull up to your house.
Oh, yeah. Unfortunately, we never had that at the time. We did use the ambulance, but by the time, mom or dad was in an ambulance, it was the newer versions.
Right.
So
I guess it had a red light on the top.
Yep.
The hearse.
Like a police car type thing. And
Right.
so I'm glad we were able to get together, because anytime when I was able to read off those lists of names, and there's more, but I mean, I can tell you where, if I look down through just about 95% of them where they lived, go by the houses. That's where Murray Peacock lived. That's where the Canes lived. My parents camped with the Canes and the Lees. They would go up like the Black River up in that area. And so was retired by that time from ambulance corps stuff. But that's where the friendships started.
The LaRoses too. Dick LaRose, yeah.
LaRose, yeah. So there was a nice group of people, and they stayed friends, and right till their last days. And so the ambulance corps will forever, I know for me, and I'm assuming for Cindy and even Wendy, that it's got a great little spot in our heart.
Yeah.
So
we greatly appreciate that. And I still remember, even up to last year, Joe Lafredo, he's a big walker. So Joe would walk into the ambulance corps and come and visit me. And then he would say, Jim, don't wait too long to retire. Do it sooner than later. And then and he would come in and say hello and go on for his walk. And again, he was another gentleman, like you mentioned, that I think he told me he was a member for 38 years.
I'll bet.
Yeah.
And a very active one. And then he got into PAC B. He was terrific on PAC B.
Oh, he's very helpful. Very helpful. Yep. And that forever. But I think you said it all, Dickie, as far as, as far as all community. I'm not going to, go over it again, because you said it all as far as all coming together. I'm very proud of our community. And thank you so much, Jim, for your service too, because you helped the ambulance corps evolve even more under your direction. But I just want to thank you so much. Thank you, Mayor, because you said it like it was, and you refreshed our memories with that very good memory that you have. But I just thank you. Thank you for the ambulance corps. Thank you for our memories, and all of you. Have a wonderful day. Okay. Thanks again.
Thanks for having us.
See you later. Thanks,
Take
Jim.
care.
Thanks, Mayor.